What if I told you AI may have begun before we ever built the first computer? I'm not saying that's true, I don't know, but think about it with me for a moment. AI somehow began before computers existed. Where was it? Maybe the answer begins somewhere much more ordinary, with a sandwich. Before you pick up the bread, some version of the sandwich already exists in your mind. It is not real yet, but the idea is. Now, make the object bigger. A building, a car, an airplane, a computer. Before any of these things existed in the physical world, someone had to imagine some version of them. And that gives me a question. When humans invent something, do we imagine only what we are capable of building at that moment? Or can imagination travel further than the technology available to us? Hold that question. Because one man left behind the drawings of an extraordinary machine, but not the thoughts behind them. I think about this whenever I see a large airplane passing overhead. Sometimes I stop and look at it. And I think, how did human beings make this? Forget for a moment that airplanes have become ordinary. Imagine seeing one for the first time. A machine weighing many tons is moving through the sky. Hundreds of people may be sitting inside it. A few hours later, they can be on the other side of the world. Human beings took materials from the earth. They transformed them, calculated, designed, tested, and rearranged matter until it could carry people above the clouds. But before that airplane was in the sky, it was on a drawing. And before it was on a drawing, some part of it existed inside a human mind. That part is much harder to find. We can see an apple falling from a tree. We cannot see gravity itself with our eyes. We see what it does. Human thought creates a similar problem. We can see a brain. We cannot look directly at a thought from 200 years ago. We only have what people left behind. Letters, books, drawings, calculations, machines. Those are evidence. But what about the thoughts they never wrote down? Questions they considered alone, ideas they abandoned, things they imagined but knew they could never build? Those are much harder to recover. Thoughts do not leave fossils, and that creates a gap between history and everything that may once have existed inside a human mind. Here is what we know. Here is what we don't know. And between those two things, there is a word I like, maybe. Now, let's go to 19th century England. No internet, no transistor, no modern software, no artificial intelligence as a recognized field. Large amounts of calculation were still performed by human beings. And one man became obsessed with the idea that machines could take over some of that work. His name was Charles Babbage. He worked on the difference engine. Later, he designed something far more ambitious, the Analytical Engine. The evidence is clear here. We have documents, we have designs. We know that Babbage was trying to create a machine capable of performing sequences of operations mechanically. But that is not the mystery that interests me most. I want to know what he saw in his head while he was designing it. Did his imagination stop at the machine represented by the drawings? Or did he sometimes ask the next question? If a machine can do this, what else could it do? And then what? And after that? I don't know. There is no way to reconstruct every thought that passed through Babbage's mind. And I am not claiming that Charles Babbage imagined modern AI. We have no evidence for that. But we also cannot measure the outer boundary of everything he imagined. The machine he was able to design may have been smaller than the world he was able to imagine. Maybe. Now, back to what we know. Another person entered this story, Ada Lovelace, and this is where the idea becomes much more interesting. The analytical engine was not conceived as a machine tied permanently to one calculation. Its behavior could be determined by instructions. Change the instructions, and the machine could perform a different sequence of operations. Today, this idea feels completely normal. In the 19th century, it was remarkable. Ada understood that if things such as musical relationships could be expressed through abstract symbols and rules, the engine might operate on them too. She even discussed the possibility that the engine could compose elaborate pieces of music if those relationships could be expressed in the appropriate form. Think about that for a moment. Today, I can sit in front of a machine, type a few ordinary sentences, and ask it to help create music. The technology is completely different. Ada did not predict modern generative AI. She did not. But the old question remains. Can symbols, rules, and instructions become music? The conceptual territory around computing was already becoming larger than arithmetic. And then Ada left us another problem, a very important one. The machine, in her view, did not originate things on its own. It performed what humans knew how to instruct it to perform. And suddenly, our mystery changes. A machine can follow instructions. A machine can manipulate symbols. A machine might even produce music according to formal rules. But is following instructions the same thing as thinking? That question would survive long after Babbage and Lovelace were gone. Jump forward to 1950. Alan Turing published a paper titled Computing Machinery and Intelligence. It begins with a famous question: can machines think? Turing recognized a problem immediately. What exactly do we mean by machine? And what exactly do we mean by think? Instead of trying to define thinking directly, he proposed judging the machine through its behavior. He called this the imitation game. Turing also returned to Lovelace's warning, the idea that a machine can only do what we know how to instruct it to do. Now look at how far our question has traveled. First, can a machine calculate for us? Then, can one machine perform different operations depending on its instructions? Then, can machinery operate on things beyond ordinary arithmetic? And now, can a machine think? We have moved from calculation to instructions, to symbols, to intelligence. Each step widened the meaning of what a machine could be, and there is still no simple boundary showing exactly where one becomes the next. A few years later, another important moment arrived. In 1955, a proposal was written for a summer research project at Dartmouth. The project took place in 1956. And in that proposal appeared a term that would define an entire field: artificial intelligence. Now we can point to something concrete, a name, a research field. Researchers explicitly asking how intelligence, learning, language, and problem-solving might be reproduced or simulated by machines. So if someone asks when artificial intelligence became a recognized field, 1956 is an important answer. But that is slightly different from the question I began with. I'm asking about the idea beneath it. How long had humans been moving toward the possibility of machines doing things that once belonged only to human minds? That question is harder, because ideas do not always begin when we finally give them a name. Some ideas arrive before the world is ready to build them. Humans imagined flight long before modern airplanes became possible. Humans imagined traveling beyond Earth before rockets could take us there. An idea can arrive early, And then it waits. It waits for materials. It waits for mathematics. It waits for another invention. Sometimes it waits for another generation. Maybe AI had to wait too. Not because the entire idea already existed in finished form. It didn't. But because pieces of the question may have arrived long before the machinery capable of exploring them. Computers had to become faster. Memory had to grow. Information had to become digital. New mathematical methods had to emerge. Eventually, enough pieces existed at the same time. Maybe AI did not simply need an idea. Maybe it needed a world capable of supporting the idea. I don't know. And now, back to what we know. Today I can sit in front of a computer and speak to it in ordinary language. I can ask it to write, create images, help compose music, analyze information, write code, or solve problems involving several steps. Sometimes I stop and I think about Babbage again. Almost 200 years ago, part of the question was, can we make a machine perform calculations for us? Today we ask, what else can we make machines do? These questions are separated by almost 2 centuries, but there may be a thread connecting them. Each generation builds a machine, then somebody looks at it and asks for one more thing. Which brings me back to the sandwich. Before you make something, some version of it may already exist in your mind. A sandwich waits for minutes. An airplane may wait for decades. An idea like artificial intelligence may wait for generations. So where did the idea behind AI begin? With neural networks? Dartmouth in 1956, Turing in 1950, Lovelace, Babbage, or somewhere earlier? I don't know. History can show us documents, machines, published papers, dates. Those are facts. History preserves evidence. Some thoughts were written down, some became machines, some changed the world, and some disappeared with the people who thought them. Maybe Babbage never imagined anything like the future we live in. That is entirely possible. Or maybe his imagination traveled further than his machines could follow. We cannot know. Maybe. And that leaves me with one final question. If people 200 years ago were capable of imagining things their world could not yet build, what exists in someone's mind today that our world still cannot build? Something we currently dismiss as impossible. Something that has no name yet. Something that may have to wait for new materials, new science, or people who have not even been born. 200 years from now, a student may learn about it in a history class, and to that student, it may seem completely obvious, the way an airplane feels ordinary to us. The way talking to a computer is beginning to feel ordinary to us. What is that idea? I don't know. And that is exactly where this story ends. At the edge of what we know. Looking into what we don't. Maybe